Number 10. Bastnäs Car Cemetery. Deep in the forest of Sweden's Värmland region, near the Norwegian border, there's a car cemetery filled with hundreds of vehicles dating back to the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. They've been here for so long that many of them are covered in moss and even have trees growing through them. The cars are stacked on top of each other and parked side by side at the well-hidden property known as the Bastnäs Car Cemetery. Legend claims that many of the vehicles were left behind by American soldiers when they returned to the US at the end of World War II, but the rumor has never been verified. Word also has it that the graveyard is owned by two reclusive brothers who interact minimally with visitors and avoid the spotlight, but they live nearby and keep an eye on the property. Past sightseers claimed that the owners once left a note scrawled across several car seat covers, stating that it's fine for people to look around and take pictures, but not to take anything or leave the site looking any different than they found it. The message noted that there had been at least 30 burglaries at the car cemetery so far that year, and that the owners were fed up with the repeated crimes. They gave a stern warning that they had set traps inside some buildings on the land, and that they didn't care if someone got hurt or died. The note also reportedly contained a warning to remember that the visitors were in a secluded place where nobody could hear them scream. No one knows whether these stories are actually true, or if perhaps they're exaggerated or the product of local folklore, but many photographers, artists, and curious explorers continue to take their risks by visiting, and there are no known reports of anything bad happening to anyone. Number 9. Heaven Can Wait B-24 Bomber. In 1944, during World War II, U.S. Army Air Corps 2nd Lieutenant Thomas V. Kelly Jr. was sent on a mission to disrupt Japanese supply chains in 1944. The B-24 bomber he was flying in, nicknamed Heaven Can Wait, was shot down over Papua New Guinea, and the aircraft, along with the 11 crew members on board, remained missing for over 70 years. When Kelly's family realized that he probably wasn't coming home, they had a tombstone made in his memory. In 2013, some of his surviving relatives found information online about the plane he was shot down in. They spent several years conducting further research, which finally paid off when experts searched the ocean floor in 2017 in hopes of finding the bomber. The team located Heaven Can Wait in Hansa Bay. After sitting more than 200 feet underwater for decades, the wreck is heavily deteriorated and in extremely poor condition. While the remains of Kelly and his fellow crew members remain officially unaccounted for, the discovery brought long-awaited closure to their families, who now have a much clearer picture of what happened that fateful day. Number 8. Bagger 258 and Bagger 1473. Nicknamed the Blue Wonder, Bagger 258 is a massive bucket wheel excavator that went into operation in Soviet-controlled East Germany in 1964 as a coal mining machine. Today, it sits abandoned on a field in the municipality of Skipkow, measuring nearly 563 feet long and 164 feet high. The gargantuan vehicle was like a mobile factory. Equipped with tank-like tracks, it moved at a painfully slow speed of less than 20 feet per minute. The colossal contraption's 10 blades dug 49 feet into the ground, collecting huge buckets full of coal and soil. Some of the coal was mechanically sifted and diverted to feed the machine's engine, but Bagger 258 was abandoned in 2002 when there was nothing left to mine. It was easier and cheaper to leave it behind than to dismantle or relocate it. Skipkow is home to another abandoned excavator known as Bagger 1473, which is often mistaken for Bagger 258. It operated from 1965 to 2002. After it was taken out of service, local municipalities agreed to preserve it and designated it as a monument to the area's mining history. But Bagger 1473 proved expensive to maintain. It deteriorated rapidly and became a popular target for vandalism. In 2019, the same municipalities that voted to preserve the excavator announced plans to scrap it. In a bid to stop this from happening, state archaeologists and officials quickly moved to have the machine declared historically significant. For now, Bagger 1473 continues to rot as authorities try to figure out how to preserve it and who will pay for it. Number 7. Miles of locomotives. In 2017, news reports revealed that there were around 300 unused Union Pacific locomotives collecting dust along some railroad tracks near Interstate 10 between Benson and Tucson, Arizona. Many people had noticed the freight cars, which sat neatly lined up for 3 miles, and were curious about why they were there. Fox 10 Phoenix looked into the matter and caught up with Jeff DeGraff, the company's director of media relations. He described the collection of locomotives as a strategic reserve that had been set aside because they were no longer needed during a manufacturing slowdown in the US. In other words, the cars were placed in storage in Arizona, where the dry conditions tend to cause less wear and tear, while they waited to be put back into use. Speaking with the news station, DeGraff explained explained that the arid climate meant that the company didn't have to worry too much about rust and other weather and climate-related damage. He made it clear that the engines, which were valued between $1 million and $3 million each, weren't permanently abandoned, and that they were moved in and out as needed. In the meantime, Union Pacific employees monitored and maintained the cars to ensure that they were ready to return to the railroad. Number 6. The Fugitive Train Wreck. The 1993 movie The Fugitive, starring Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones, contains a famous scene where a freight train crashes into the main character, Richard Kimball's transport bus. If you've seen the movie and noticed that the collision seems incredibly realistic, there's a reason for it. And it's not because of CGI effects and advanced imaging technologies, which had not yet become standard in the movie industry. Back then, the best way to capture lifelike effects on camera was to film the real deal. The scene was shot on tracks belonging to North Carolina's Great Smoky Mountain Railway in the town of Dillsboro, where the filmmakers placed the bus on a purpose-built spur and crashed a hollowed-out train into it. Because they only had one shot at getting the crash right, the crew captured it using a lot more cameras than shooting a movie scene normally requires. For some added excitement, they loaded some PVC pipes with explosives and buried them beneath the track. Writing for TheSmokies.com, journalist John Gillian described the effect as every 5-year-old playing with Hot Wheels' dream come to life. He further explained that the railway asked the film crew to leave behind the wrecked vehicles as a tourist attraction. The crew agreed and left the train and banged-up bus, which was nearly torn in half in the crash. They sit on private property owned by the Great Smoky Mountain Railway. Those who wish to see the vehicles can catch a glimpse of them from a passing train on the Tuckasegee River excursion, but the train doesn't stop, so exploring the vehicles up close is not an option. Have you seen the movie The Fugitive? Tell us in the comments and hit subscribe while you're at it. Number 5. FDR's Train. For decades, rumors have swirled about a hidden 1930s-era train station beneath Grand Central Terminal in New York City, known simply as Track 61. It reportedly contains a single track. It was built specifically for then-President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, who didn't want people to know that he had polio and needed a way to come and go without being spotted by the public. The native New Yorker was likely worried that if society knew about his polio, it would weaken his image due to the widespread stigma surrounding the disease at the time. Roosevelt arrived on Track 61 in a specially designed armored train car that carried his limousine. From there, the limo was driven off the train and into a huge elevator that carried FDR and his entourage up to the historic Waldorf Astoria Hotel's ballroom. Track 61 went out of use when Roosevelt passed away in 1945. Until recently, a deteriorating rail car sat on the track amid widespread claims that it was the train that transported FDR in and out of the station. The Danbury Railway Museum in Connecticut now owns the car. Upon taking a closer look, experts revealed that it didn't belong to Roosevelt and that he probably never rode in it. Known as a baggage car or tool car, it was used for much less exciting everyday purposes. The interior consists of an aging wooden floor, hooks for hanging tools, and a generator. While the true story about the car is far less fascinating than many would like to think, it's one of few known remaining cars of its type from the time, which makes it fascinating in its own right. Number 4. Boeing B-17E Swamp Ghost. In early 1942, the Japanese Imperial Navy seized an Australian military base at Rabaul in Papua New Guinea. The U.S. military dispatched 6 Boeing B-17E Flying Fortress heavy bombers from Honolulu with plans to strike the invading fleet. One of the planes was piloted by Captain Fred Eaton. During his first run over the target, the aircraft's bomb bay doors got stuck. It was subsequently swarmed by enemy bombers, while anti-aircraft fire struck a wing fuel tank. Eaton piloted the plane toward Port Moresby on the other side of the island, but he ran out of fuel along the way and decided to land in what looked like a large open field. It turned out to be the Agaimbo Swamp. Thankfully, Eaton and his fellow crew members survived, but their trek out of the remote crash site was nothing short of grueling. For 64 years, the downed aircraft sat in 5 feet of thick grass and swamp water, earning it the nickname Swamp Ghost. A crew led by aviation enthusiast Alfred Hagen finally removed it in 2006. The process was tedious, requiring the team to disassemble the plane and have it flown out by a helicopter, piece by piece. For the next 4 years, it sat in a warehouse in Papua New Guinea amid controversy over who had the rights to sell the historic aircraft. The Swamp Ghost finally arrived in the US in 2010 and is now on display at the Pearl Harbor Aviation Museum in Honolulu. Number 3. Red Army Tank. In 2015, workers discovered an abandoned Red Army tank near the town of Seno in Belarus, known as KV-1, or Kliment Voroshilov-1. The tank was named after a Soviet Union marshal and may date as far back as 1941, the same year that the Germans invaded the USSR. At the time, the KV-1 was the Soviet military's standard tank Equipped with a heavy armored plate, it was extremely effective against most German anti-tank weapons. After sitting submerged in the swamp for over 70 years, the tank was removed by salvage crews. During the salvage, which was captured on video, they discovered that the tank turret was upside down and separated from the chassis, indicating that the vehicle was deliberately scuttled. It's unclear whether the vehicle was destroyed before or after it got stuck in the mud, and it also bore signs of possible fire damage. The historic machine may have been one of the 2,250 Red Army tanks that were used in the Battle of Senna during World War II. During the battle, the Soviets lost over 800 tanks, while the Germans lost around 300, which means that there may be more in the area, still waiting to be found. Number 2. Museum of Soviet Vehicles. Nestled in the Estonian countryside, about 90 minutes outside the capital city of Tallinn, is a large graveyard filled with hundreds of Cold War-era machines. Known as the Museum of Soviet Vehicles, it contains cars, trucks, motorcycles, trams, buses, ambulances, police cars, diggers, and even some strange-looking contraptions that aren't readily identifiable at first glance. Most of the collections date back to sometime between the 1950s and 80s. While the property is maintained and overseen, the vehicles are unrestored and in various states of decay. Many are rusting, while others are in surprisingly good condition for their age, with paint jobs that are still intact and only minor signs of deterioration. The site has more room for vehicles, according to career explorer Marek Braun, who wrote about his visit to the museum in his blog, Indie Traveler. As visitors enter, they can expect to trigger the emergency lights on the Soviet-era police car. This is meant to draw their attention to a donation box on the car's hood, where they can leave a small donation. Once the money is dropped in, the lights turn off, and the visitor is free to explore. Number 1. Heritage Park Wreck. For many years, a small plane sat perched among tree branches at Heritage Park in Mission, British Columbia. Today, all that remains of the single-seater aircraft is a mangled metal mass consisting of what appears to be a cockpit and perhaps a wing. Very few people seem to know about the wreck, and even many locals are reportedly unaware of it. To add to the mystery, no one knows exactly when the plane crashed, just that it's been there since 1971 or earlier. The only reason anyone knows this is because a graffiti artist who left their mark on the aircraft took the time to attach the year to their work. There are reportedly no known records of the plane or the crash, and it's unknown whether the vehicle sits at the original crash site or if it was moved to its current location from somewhere else. In recent years, the wreck has fallen to the ground in several pieces, which can be found near trails that run through the park. The site is relatively easy to reach, but requires about 30 minutes of walking. Thanks for watching. Would you still visit the Bastness Car Cemetery if the notes the brothers left were real? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time. Bye!